This video lesson is an introduction to the basic skills surrounding negative numbers, including the definition of negative numbers, where they fall on number lines, and how to tell which numbers are less than and greater than other numbers. And so first, I want to go all the way back to when we first started learning math, way back when. One of the first things that's ever talked about in math are the basic counting numbers. We call them natural numbers. Those are 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. And those form the basis of the first skills that we build with math. We learn their names, we learn what how they're written, we learn what they actually mean. Eventually we add 0, and we have a complete set of sort of the positive numbers and 0. Eventually we add the decimals and we add the fractions and we fill in the spaces between the whole values. Eventually we'll add irrational numbers and we'll create the complete set of things called real numbers. But when we talk about negative numbers, we're actually looking at the other end of the number line. Because even though our number line, when we first started talking about whole numbers, started with 1 or maybe with 0, we can actually count backwards through that, and you may have heard that before. Counting down from 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0, and then the first number to the left of 0 on the number line is actually negative 1. The first number that is negative. Like 1 is the first number that is positive, negative 1 is the first number that is negative. 2 to negative 2. And we continue counting backwards, 3, negative 4, negative 5, etc., until we complete the whole numbers on the left side of the number line. And so that's the set of numbers that we call negative. Numbers that are positive have a value greater than 0, and they move to the right. Numbers that are negative have a value less than 0, they move to the left. So go ahead, pause the video, write this definition down, come back when you're ready to move on. So as we said, negative is to the left, positive is to the right. Greater values move to the right on a number line, lesser values move to the left on a number line. So as we go forward, our values get greater. As we go leftward, our values become lesser. And that's going to be the basis of how we know which numbers are less than and greater than other numbers on the number line. Now it's important to notice while we're sitting here that 0 sort of acts like a mirror. If you start at 0 and you go 1 to the right and 1 to the left, you both get a form of 1 and negative 1. 2 to the right gives you 2, 2 to the left gives you negative 2. 3 to the right gives you 3, 3 to the left gives you negative 3, and that's the structure of the entire number line. And so before we get into ordering and comparing numbers, the first thing we want to talk about is this thing called an integer. Now, an integer is just a fancy name for any whole value, a positive value, a negative value, or 0. Those are all the integers. They're the things we typically see drawn on a number line. So go ahead, pause the video, write down the definition of integer, come back when you're ready to move on. So taking a look at these numbers that we have on the number line, which are the integers, that's how we're going to start the process of comparing positive and negative numbers. And the idea of comparing a number is just determining which integer is greater than another. Now, when we're first starting to do this, we can use a number line to help us out. So we know with positive numbers that the greater looking the number, for lack of a better term right now, we'll get to it in a second, the greater the number. So numbers with greater digits in the higher place values mean that it is actually a greater number. And we said before that the values of numbers increase as we go rightward down the number line. However, for negative numbers, the value of the number that we see detached from the negative sign, so for example 3 and 5, 3 is less than 5, but as soon as we add the negative sign, negative 5 is actually to the left of negative 3. And if values become greater as we move to the right, that means values become lesser as we move to the left. So 3 may be less than 5, but negative 5 is less than negative 3. They sort of operate backwards from the positive numbers on the number line. Very, very large-looking negative numbers that would be greater than others on the positive side are actually lesser on the negative side, because very large negative numbers are farther to the left. And that's how we compare negative numbers with positive numbers. As the digits of a negative number get larger, the number itself becomes lesser. As the digits of a positive number get larger, the number becomes greater, but negatives work the opposite way. So here are some numbers that we could determine which are greater than and lesser. Go ahead and pause the video, see what you can do using the less than sign, putting the lesser number on the left. See if you can find out which numbers are less than others. So for the first one, we have 32 being less than 40. That's one we're familiar with. For the second one, negative 15 and 25, a negative number is always less than a positive number because it's to the left on a number line. And for the last one, even though it's tempting to say negative 20 is less than negative 30, remember on a number line, like the open one I'm creating at the top, negative 20 is actually to the right of negative 30 on the number line, which means negative 20 is actually greater than negative 30. Alternatively, negative 30 is less than negative 20. Now, when we move from two numbers to a large set of negative numbers, then we start doing this thing called ordering integers, which just means comparing a set of more than two integers and determining how all the numbers compare to each other, either in an ascending order, least to greatest, or a descending order, greatest to least. Again, we can use a number line to help us out. The greater the digits of a positive number, the greater the integer. As the digits and the values of a negative number become larger, it becomes lesser. So go ahead, pause the video, work on these three sets of integers, order them from least to greatest, and come back when you are ready to move. So our first set of numbers here are all positive numbers. We're very familiar with that. 10 is the least, then 13, 15, 23, 42. Now ordering from least to greatest, as we said, is something called ascending order, meaning climbing or becoming greater. Now for the numbers in the middle, we only have one negative number that's involved there. The negative number is the least of any of those numbers. And then we have 0, 4, 7, 11, and 23. Whereas in the final set of numbers over on the right, we have quite a few negative numbers. The greatest, if they were all positive, the greatest value here would be 20, which means that is actually the least value as far as negatives, because very large negative numbers are less than smaller looking negative numbers. So negative 20, negative 17, negative 8, negative 4, negative 3, and finally 4. So that's how we order integers. We can order the positive numbers and the negative numbers and then put them together. 0 is always in the middle between the negatives and positives. And remember that the negative set of the number line actually seems like it works in reverse, which counting up like we would in positive numbers actually moves us to the left in negative numbers. So I have one question I want you to think about before you come into class, or if you're watching this in class before you move on to the next activity, and that is, where have you seen negative numbers, or just the idea of negative values, things that are opposite to positive values, somewhere in life? And they show up all over the place, so there's no particular answer that we're looking for here. Just brainstorm, where have you seen this idea of negative values before, and we'll use those moving forward as we talk more about negative numbers.